if you live in Midland long enough, or Odessa, or just the whole Permian region, you will know that we have an abundance of wind, solar, gas, and Bitcoin is doing a very good job of being an attractive option to kind of those all the power groups are basically intersecting at one intersection, and Bitcoin is the reason that they're all coming together. So Bitcoin is providing the same service in the gas world that it's providing in the off-take solar business or the off-take wind operator out there, we're all here together in this. Yeah. So the ability to cross ourselves and benefit the other business sectors honestly isn't available without Bitcoin being that technology.
Well, good afternoon, Paul. I'm glad to have you here today. We connected on LinkedIn, and I have always loved the idea of Bitcoin mining with natural gas. And the one reason is because I am a sort of a nerd, and I remember way back whenever I was a teenager, I was a big gamer, and the gamers all loved Bitcoin, and it was before it became super popular. And so now whenever I hear Bitcoin and seeing the massive storage facilities we have here in West Texas and the servers, and that's also super cool to me. So whenever we linked up, man, I was super excited to have you on the podcast to talk Bitcoin.
Dude, I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation. Yeah, it was LinkedIn. I think you dropped a comment just reaching out if I would be interested in talking, and absolutely. I'm here local as well, just like you, and I've been in the industry for about 5 years mining, and Midland has a lot to offer. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. So start us off. Like, how'd you get to Bitcoin? What's it like? Where'd you go to school and education?
Yeah, absolutely.
Life?
Yeah.
Then how do we wrap our career up into Bitcoin?
Okay, similar just to you, gaming.
I
grew up in the Woodlands, north of Houston. Yeah. I graduated high school in 2002. That was the time the Xbox came out. The original Xbox, and we were avid gamers, and Xbox turned into modem configurations, which turned into learning about networks, because modems and internet and cable internet for us was something that we had early on in our lives. My dad worked for Exxon, so being an oil and gas child, this industry brings a lot of, there's perks, and one of those was internet that we had before everyone else. And so with that came port forwarding and, upload and download speed and lag and, things that who would have guessed. Fast forward 10 years, I get an undergrad in mechanical engineering from Texas Tech, move back to Houston in 2007, get married, and get a master's in petroleum engineering. Upon graduating from U of H with that master's, I get scooped up and move out here to Midland in 10. And I work for a company called Crown Quest Operating. I started out drilling, finished my career there as a production engineer, and moved on to basically another group that we started, Fortress Energy. And with Fortress Energy, that was a land company. Majority of the team is landmen. And I was in charge of operations there, similar to what I was doing at Crown Quest. And that would have been a time when Bitcoin kind of came into my life.
And it didn't start taking off, I would say.
It had not.
No. It had not yet. It was still not there yet.
That's right. We were not mining yet, but what we were doing was buying. So this would have been like 2016 when I first started buying Bitcoin as more of a stock investment sort of feature, right? And fast forward a few years, we learned a little bit more about what the market is, what this Bitcoin and crypto market is, and kind of how to stay in your lane and realize that Bitcoin is that path that you want to adhere to. And so with that, the next phase of adoption within Bitcoin was to mine it. And so it felt that with the opportunities that we have here in the Permian Basin, and my background being oil and gas predominantly, oil and gas in the Midland Permian seems to lack innovation. And so during this era, we were, as an industry, pretty stale on ingenuity or like inventions. How are you drilling today? It's the same that we've been drilling since the last 50 years.
Right.
And so as a sector, kind of got boring, if I was to be honest. And Bitcoin kind of came out of nowhere to say, hey, look, there's this opportunity to take what you already know, all this oil and gas, education, and bolt on. We're not talking about new drill. We're not talking about anything to like stress out about. The application exists as it stands today. Let's add to that like a VRU. But in this case, this vapor recovery unit is going to look like a Bitcoin mine. And we're going to capture all that associated gas that we have always had a problem with. And again, we're bolting on a kit. We're not adding something crazy here. We're just facilitating that gas to go somewhere else. And that just like really struck a chord in me, because as an operations engineer, we dealt all the time with gas as, we call it like the redheaded stepchild. I know that's not a good term, but like we didn't want the gas. We want that crude. And so through history, we kind of treated that as a second class product. And where regulatory fell in place, you follow suit and you put the necessary equipment to capture it, or you shut your facility off. And thankfully, technology kind of came, and you would think the technology would have come from the oil and gas industry, like that they would have innovated this. But no, dude, this comes out of left field from a sector that we're not even familiar with. And they come in and say, hey man, we have this technology, and the only thing we are seeking is the cheapest source of power. And lo and behold, that's natural gas. And like we could argue all day what those cheap entry of power is, but Bitcoin wants power that is consistent, that needs to be reliable, and it needs to last for, many, many years. And from a base load standpoint, natural gas is the perfect catalyst for that sort of opportunity. And so we're sitting there saying, no, this isn't a problem. This is an opportunity. And so that's what sucked me into the Bitcoin as a whole. That's how I got orange pilled into the mining.
Right. Yeah. So, I don't know how many there is. I know that I have a few customers, and we talked about this, but I have a few customers that have the Bitcoin mining facilities out here in West Texas. And for people listening, I would be willing to bet that many people don't know that there is. I don't know how many there is already out here, but in West Texas, but there's already these big storage facilities pumping out.
It's not it's not so much a question of like how many individual players per se are in the region. It's more so you want to be more aware of the load. And what I mean is the electricity. Most of these providers, most of these Bitcoin miners that you speak of are doing two things. They're either mining on grid, using the natural overhead power lines running to a substation. So they're pulling electricity just like you are at your house. They're building out immense facilities. Or they're running sort of the same system, but their base load is not the electric grid, it's a natural gas generator. And so they have to either purchase the electricity off the grid or create the electricity off of the gas. These are the two facilities that you're seeing, at least in Texas. I know nuclear is something, I know there's wind, I know there's solar, but for like the long-term base load, this is what we're talking about, the gas or the grid. And so what you're seeing as far as like, I couldn't speak to how many different mining companies are in the Permian Basin alone. What I could speak to is the volume of base load that is being created for Bitcoin only. So we're talking hundreds of megawatts in this West Texas region that would be able to power many Houstons, over and over again. So and that could either be one provider or that could be 100 providers,
Sure.
So I can't speak to how many actual miners are out here, but I can speak to the Permian Basin has an immense amount of both grid power and natural gas power that is almost either sitting on the sideline, stranded, unavailable, or just overflowing in waste.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love what you're saying because like the Permian is known for oil and gas, and like I feel, maybe I'm wrong about this, I feel like we have tons of solar panels, we have the Bitcoin mining is here, there's windmills, like it's like really I feel like it's starting to change to be called like the energy, like we produce energy here. And I'd also say, don't get me wrong, on the Bitcoin miners, having low humidity and not much corrosion, this is what kind of like makes a lot of it easier. Does that help your Bitcoin mining?
Yeah.
Whenever you don't have like high humidity and it's very dry.
Yes, and I want to answer the first question too.
Yeah.
That intersection, like now that we Permian, if you live in Midland long enough, or Odessa, or just the whole Permian region, you will know that we have an abundance of wind, solar, gas, and Bitcoin is doing a very good job of being an attractive option to kind of those all the power groups are basically intersecting at one intersection, and Bitcoin is the reason that they're all coming together. So Bitcoin is providing the same service in the gas world that it's providing in the offtake solar business or the offtake wind operator out there, we're all here together in this. Yeah. So the ability to cross ourselves and benefit the other business sectors honestly isn't available without Bitcoin being that technology. The second part of your question was the humidity. So Midland, just like any environment that the mining companies are going to gravitate towards, the first reason that they're in that area is because the power is the cheapest power possible. The second will be for them to facilitate their operations around that environment that they are in, heavy snows or hot summers. For Midland, we have a consistent dry year, we have low humidity, and that is helpful. That is a big plus for the equipment that we run. It almost keeps it stale, in a state of staleness where it's not rusting and it's deteriorating at a very, very slow pace, okay? And it's almost frozen in time, so to speak. And that bodes well for the equipment that we're running. On the flip side of that, we have wicked hot summers. Yeah. I mean, you've been out there in the West Texas. I mean, it gets up to like 120. Yeah. I mean, that's like 45 C for those Europeans out there. But that's hot.
Everybody else.
For everyone else that doesn't have to deal with American metrics, we are hot. It gets hot out here. And that dry heat is a different heat than what you might experience down at the coast, right? In Houston's per se. So that's the trade-off. The trade-off is we have this arid, dry climate, and we have low water, so low humidity. So we have dust. And so dust is not something that the machines like very much. And so a big part of maintenance out here where you have equipment that runs very well because of the air and because of the dry humidity, we also have to combat these what we call haboobs or these crazy dust storms, kind of what you see in the movies. You got 30 feet of visibility. I know it sounds crazy, but that's a dust storm because the entire Permian Basin hasn't seen water in 7 months because we don't get rain. Right. And that's the environment that you understand now. During the cold season, it's great. It's dry, it's cold, but it's an amazing environment for mining. In the summer, maybe not so much. It gets wicked hot. So unless you're properly deploying the equipment to combat the expected heat that you are otherwise going to experience out here, either in July or August, maybe even sometimes into September. You would think for other regions that's the fall. Yeah, right. Yeah, dude, it's like we're like still coming out of the shoulder month of summer. Mm-hmm. So I think Midland bodes well for the environment from the majority of the year. I would say at least 80% of the year. This is an excellent environment for mining.
Yeah. Okay, that was, dude. I love the explanation. By the way, you put that out like everybody. I understand like completely. So, what do you do? By the way, in here in the Permian, what are we doing? What is your business doing?
So currently with Verde Mining, we stood up a small Bitcoin mine for an operator here in the basin, and that operator, prior to our approaching them, they were flaring their gas. The field is very standard to what you would see out here in the Permian. Small, maybe 5 wells commingled into one single system. They all produce oil. They're all viable assets to the operator. But the operator has never had a gas purchase or a sales point across this facility. So for the life of the operation, they've always burned gas. And so here's a perfect example of how the Bitcoin kind of works. So we came and approached them and said, hey, we would like to try a process on some of your flared gas. Can we rent a generator, bring it out here, tie into your already existing fuel stream, and deviate a little bit of the gas away from the flame to this combusting unit, this generator. And this generator is going to generate electricity as the best of its ability. And downstream of that, I'm going to hook up this phone booth. It looks like a porta potty. That's about how big the first one was like the size of a porta potty. And you'd open the door, and inside you'd be able to see like 20 computers. And I explained this to the operator. I'm going to set a generator, and next to the generator, I'm going to set a porta potty. And inside that porta potty, I'm going to fill it with computers. And I expect this to never turn off, and I will pay you 50% of Henry Hub. And that's kind of how that started the whole conversation.
Wow. Okay.
So we were on like a floating program with this operator, and we were just trying something out.
Yeah.
And so that ran for like 10 months, and this was during the 6.25 Bitcoin per block reward.
Okay.
And we were immediately realized some amazing opportunity where that gas.
Yeah, that was kind of like your proof of concept.
That was definitely the proof of concept. Yeah. And what that showed us was in that era, and we went through a halving. So in that era of mining, our little system, our proof of concept was 15 MCF a day. That's what we were consuming in this rental generator. And I was basically generating like $188 per MCF. Okay, so 15 MCF is getting burned. I'm making $180 times every 1 MCF that gets burned throughout that 24-hour period. And we're saying, wait, how is this gas worth like $180 per MCF? Like, what is going on here? That's like so astronomical. Like, it's unbelievable.
And so at that time they were probably getting paid what we always stand about 2 or 3 or what's the
we were 50% of Henry Hub, so it didn't really matter. It didn't matter.
Sure.
And so that turned into this is crazy. You're making like $1,300 a day off of this 10 MCF. Like, what's going on? And this is our first entrance into like what the markets look like, the volatility. Sure. But through all of that volatility, it was also evident that kind of standing up the Bitcoin mine, under most circumstances, you could beat Henry Hub. Okay? So we could beat the gas markets all day long.
Yeah.
So we passed the hat, so to speak, is some language we use around here, where we kind of just friends and family, and we raised money. And at the same time, before the raise was happening, the operator had received a letter from the Railroad Commission kind of alluding to the fact that they were not going to get renewed that flare permit. And so now they're in jeopardy of losing all of their crude production because the state will not renew the flare permit. So we reached out to the state and said, hey, man, we want to do this Bitcoin mine through this capacity. And the state gave them an extension on that flare permit. And that gave us that kind of fuel that it sounds like the regulatories are cool, or they are at least interested in this being part of the system. So let's go fundraise this and put that flare out in its entirety. And so we did that, and the flares have been off for the last 3 years, and we're coming up on our first, term renegotiation on that initial contract. And so for the last few years, I've been mining Bitcoin and basically learning the ins and outs on what it takes to do the natural gas aspect of mining, because I believe that that's where everyone's going to gravitate towards. Natural gas is a far superior product for generating electricity, and if you have the team, which requires training and education, all this stuff that we have been focusing on heavily, we believe that like this industry is going to have a huge turnaround as far as like the support staff that we need. We need folks that want to get dirty but want to have like that education foundation where power is imminent. I mean, our current president is asking for this. He wants that sort of directive. And it comes at a time when not only does America need it, the Bitcoin industry is asking for it too. And you kind of have a good opportunity to say all this work that we've been doing in the past can amount to educating the next wave of entrants that we absolutely need in this industry. So Verde mining has been a mining avenue through which we teach others what it takes to basically prop mine a natural gas facility, whether that's for your company or that's for yourself, whether that's on your mom and dad's lease or that's, for your company's operations. We are here. I mean, I'm in the Midland Basin. I'm not going anywhere. But the intent is to basically educate the community on really what's coming around the corner, and then to not like miss the forest for the trees. And we have a lot of gas out here.
A lot of gas.
And there's a lot of opportunity to innovate. And like a big saying is like, we need more innovation in the basin. And like the Permian Basin is a perfect foundation through which companies can get started. We have so much power here. And, what we're talking about is, that intersection of power and innovation.
Yeah, that's excellent. I wanted to put in a comment that I actually remember on LinkedIn years ago. It was years ago. I don't remember, and I don't think it was you, but someone was starting to propose this out here. And this was years ago. Hey, I want to burn natural gas with Bitcoin, and I mean, I hate to say this because I don't like that people do this to anyone, but they were mocked publicly on LinkedIn, and I thought that wasn't a very for one, I respect anybody's grind, no matter what, industry whatever you're pushing in. If you're trying something, I salute you. But but to mock someone trying to put a bolt-on thing to help the oil, it was man, it's very tough to see people not accept it.
I think it's not. I mean, it's not a disrespect or a knock on anybody who may have had an ignorant thought.
Yeah, right.
And that ignorance there's nothing wrong with having that position. I mean, in all honesty, Bitcoin's been around for since 2009. Yeah. We don't have operational prudence or history like the oil and gas has.
So yeah.
So and you're trying to invoke an idea amongst a lot of very smart minds. These people here in Midland didn't get rich from Bitcoin. They got rich from doing some amazing oil and gas deals, and they're very good at producing that oil and gas, which is the number one resource on our planet. And so it's not like I don't knock them.
Yeah, right.
Or I don't knock anybody for knocking someone's ideas. I will say that if you hadn't had a chance to at least do some research, I would say that you are just making yourself aware to others, kind of that ignorance exists.
Right.
Okay,
right.
And that's okay. A lot of us choose when we want to stop learning.
You said articulated that so well.
I mean, it's and I guess you kind of have to. Once I think in this industry, when you keep peddling the same idea and you kind of hope that more and more people come around.
Yeah.
It's the intent that you really do have to meet people where they're at in this industry.
Yeah,
and it's so new. And then not only that, but not every horse that you bring to water is going to drink, right?
Absolutely.
So the patience and the business, this business, if anything, is a very good catalyst of teaching you patience, because you will be told no a lot.
Yeah.
And but it doesn't discredit the technology or what is coming.
Yeah.
And I can point you to 3 or 4 different articles even this week of either Energy Transfer or Chevron or VoltaGrid, all doing major partnerships within the state of Texas that are going to be facilitating data centers. And though while data center and Bitcoin are not in the same conversation, they both do require power. The facilities are exactly the same from a power deployment standpoint. What you have downstream of that power looks very different between a data center and a Bitcoin mine, but both are aspects that require a use case for that natural gas.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
And it requires a use case for being good experts at combusting that natural gas, which in turn requires more heightened educated workforce, which only benefits the community. And again, I could just keep going on and on again with this, but that's where you have to start. You have to start with the education piece of how this is going to benefit us as a community, and then you can slowly walk them into, oh, in order to do this, we're going to have to orange pill you. Hey, get ready. Okay. Yeah. And I think that's that complementary piece that Bitcoin offers, is that there's no barrier to entry for you as an individual to do anything Bitcoin related. And it almost has a overlapping benefit wherever you are. So if I can meet you where you're at, I can guarantee you that you don't have to be a mastered engineer to do this. You don't have to be some production specialist in the oil and gas world, but you do have to have someone that wants to continue to learn. You have to want to be open to these technologies. And then you just have to practice what you speak. And I mean, that's the adoption.
The adoption part. Yeah. So I will say that I'm ignorant on trying to get, like, I just rent construction equipment. So like, I'm not pushing on the edge of technology. I just jumped into an industry that's kind of already established. So I don't know. It's cool to hear how you have a new technology and get people to start adopting it. Like, I have never went through that process.
Sure.
Yeah, myself either.
And I think that's probably the hardest part of Bitcoin is the education piece, because there's so many different approaches to how maybe the adoption of this idea will benefit your business. Because we're speaking right now, we're just talking about an alternative to flaring your gas, right? Like, you could flare your gas, or you could try this and make some money off of the gas that you otherwise are wasting. And that's just one piece that Bitcoin serves. But then over here on the other spectrum, you could be talking about finances and holding Bitcoin on your balance sheet as a company, because you can take a page out of Michael Saylor's book and see that when you hold Bitcoin, it can do X to your bottom line. And if held long enough, X could happen to your performing business. And I'm not saying that that's a requirement in any company. I'm just saying that, like, the education piece is so paramount in that what you're speaking to, you step into an environment for yourself, and most folks already know what the business is that you're serving. And I think it's just new territory to say that, like, I need to learn something before they can do it, and then I need to teach them how to do it so that they can, like, do it for themselves. Again, it's a servant mindset. Okay, but without the education, honestly, we're going to be all lost.
You're right.
So,
that's absolutely. Where was I on? So what is the? I always thought, and I asked you this when we were talking, but I don't know. What is like the biggest hurdle right now? Is it like I always think of it as like regulation. But is it regulations, or is that not the biggest hurdle, or is it just getting people to adopt it?
I think it's adoption, and like the way that adoption might look is a hurdle that typically arises in natural gas pursuits would be acreage dedication. You're an operator, you're flaring right now. It's a problem.
It's a problem.
But you are dedicated to some midstream provider, and you're beholden to that contract, and you can't get out of it. I guess I would say that, like, the train of thought there is that if the operators don't technically have an out, they're not aware of the education piece. Again, it just falls back onto the education piece. If they knew that there was Bitcoin, but they also knew that they didn't have to hold the Bitcoin, or that there's options to say that, like, the Bitcoin feature is just a technology that serves the end use to have a commodity worth something. We don't have to talk about Bitcoin. The hurdle there is the operators just don't know that they don't have to have Bitcoin on the balance sheet, or we don't even have to be talking about Bitcoin, and that their gas can be worth X amount of value if they choose to do this. And so, but that hurdle there is then saying, when you have the Bitcoin miner approach that operator, they may not know that they have acreage dedications on that gas, and they are unable to give you that gas. And so that stifles the pursuit of this, like, experiment or the adoption rate, because just because that gas is flaring doesn't mean that you can just get it. It may be under contract, and it just and so the education piece falls in play to where you would want to catch that operator at inception, at time zero, when they're in the office talking about drilling this project in a year from now. So you want to catch the operator before the drill bit even goes into the ground. At that point in the deal flow, you actually have an opportunity to give that operator an out. And that's the better opportunity to capture that project. And so we're just saying the biggest barrier of entry for natural gas mining is getting a gas contract off of an operator who was unaware from the beginning that they were in a contract that would preclude them from ever talking to you in the first place. So if we could just tell operators that Bitcoin mining is a solution and is here to stay, before you go sign any sort of dedication, before you go allocate any sort of product to any midstream company, call your local Bitcoin miner, give them a call, let them know that you're gonna need takeaway for 20,000 MCF a day potentially, and consider working with a Bitcoin group to take all your gas through the entire life of that project. And that could be 10 years or that could be 3 years. I mean, I'm not, but we already spoke to, like, we want 3-year minimums, but.
So, that's I love it. It's insane. And I think doesn't the U.S. government own like billions, like billions of Bitcoin themselves? Didn't they buy out a lot? Or
took the Bitcoin that was seized for nefarious type of dealings in the early years around I want to say it's 2013 when Silk Road.
Yeah, the Silk Road.
Yep.
Yeah,
And he was just he had built a dark web website that you could go to make transactions, and the transaction exchange rate was Bitcoin. And so Bitcoin was getting moved across there for different, goods and services. And the United States government seized not only Silk Road, but all the Bitcoin at the time associated with that. And so today, that's that part of that Bitcoin that you might speak of that I'm aware of that the U.S. holds. I'm sure that there's other Bitcoin out there that the United States government is currently holding somewhere in secret. But yes, that's billions of dollars.
Billion. Yeah, I thought that like from it coming from when we were gamers and it going from Silk Road, which is illegal, to now being like a mainstream form of like
reserve currency in some currency.
In some. That's amazing. That was amazing to see. And And for me, I remember buying one Bitcoin really early on to pay for something, a good with, because I was a nerd, and
yeah. That's true. Like skins,
it was
like
skins,
Call of Duty
yeah,
skins in the early days, probably
was,
on some nefarious website would have been a Bitcoin purchase for us.
Bitcoin purchase, yeah. So
I agree.
That's fun. It's really like, that's amazing to me how it came from that to like being now it's huge businesses. I've seen huge businesses own Bitcoin and keep that as like an investment kind of purpose. But I'll speak to this too. And so Paul, when we talked I'll get into it, and we talked about how we're gonna figure out how to implement a rental into the rental game, into the equipment rental world. How do we implement Bitcoin miners?
Yeah, so
we built a trailer mounted unit, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I mean, just would be off the cuff speaking, not trying to give anyone out there competition to start up a business, but hey, this is right up your alley.
Yeah.
The idea there is, there's products in the Bitcoin mining industry that are set up to accommodate more of the low volume participants, right? Typically, operators are wanting to know, hey, I'm flaring, but I'm only flaring like an X amount of time during the year.
Yeah.
I find to have problems this time of year. It's cyclical, but it only happens here, or maybe we're going to be putting on new production and we're going to have a problem, but it may not be long lasting.
Right. So we don't need to like invest into a
it's more niche in this space, but like it's harder for me to approach the operator and ask for a 3-year commitment when they're not flaring consistently for 3 years, and they don't want to be, so they can't really give that gas in that manner.
Right.
So the intent would be here is like for your sort of business to go out and capture these combo units, and there's a company here in the U.S. that that basically builds these upstream data, and it's a combo unit. So like half the container is going to be a generator, and half the container is going to be your like data center or your Bitcoin mine counterpart, and that's going to be one skidded unit. And the beauty about these units is like the scale. They operate as low as 25 MCF per day and up to 100 MCF per day. So if you have a well that is flaring, 100 MCF a day, you're above your 50 MCF a day allotment. So you definitely have to permit that. You could choose to bring one of these units out and accommodate just 100 MCF a day. And so the idea there would be buy a fleet of these combo units in a varying capacity of load capability. So like, for instance, they have units that are 325 kilowatt, that takes 100 MCF. They have units that are 160 kilowatts, that takes 45 MCF. And then you've got smaller units that take like 20 MCF and they do like 90. And you could buy a variation of these units and put these units on trailer chassis, haul them around to your well site locations, and then basically sublease a hosted model for mining. And so, obviously there's downtime on those engines, but on the rental side, you kind of already know, if you're in the rental game here in the Permian, it's and you're renting out generators already, you already understand how lucrative the business is for you. I'm not going to speak to it. I've rented your generators before, so I know what the charge is there. To have that be really all you're doing is you're charging to have the generator on site, except that you're offering the entire infrastructure for a hosted miner somewhere in Dallas, maybe in Europe. It doesn't matter where that client is. They want to put 10 machines into that box out in the middle of nowhere, they'll pay you to do that. And so I think that there's going to be a great opportunity here to have like a rental fleet that can better tackle gas contracts for operators that are going to be shorter term, where they can't commit to you. And I would say in most of those contracts, that gas is going to be free.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have to pay a nickel for that gas. If the operator wants to get their production going and flowing because compression's not there, or that VRU hasn't shown up and they can't flare anymore, but 100 MCF a day for 6 months, then you bring that unit for 6 months and you broker an agreement for a rental program, and then you fill it with a hosted group of miners. You get paid and you just sell that hash rate. And again, this is not anything new. They're already doing this on the grid side. It's just typically those contracts last for longer durations, right? But if you're getting your power for free, I'm pretty sure you can choose to charge for your hosting a lot cheaper than the mainstream.
Yeah, sure. And like, well, with any industry, I mean, even my, customers, like, there are customers that buy their own equipment and then they'll rent as they need, or like typically the smaller guys too, like they just rent equipment. And some companies don't want to have the hassle of owning their own equipment, so they rent the equipment anyway too. So it's like, if you're going to have an industry that's, these standalone buildings, there's definitely going to be, I think, a market.
A mobile as well.
Yeah, mobile.
And
like it's with every industry. Like that it comes right along with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the mobile piece is a big component to, making this work.
Yeah.
On the rental side, per se, right?
Yeah. So what are you trying? So Paul, what are you trying to accomplish? Like, what's your goals for Verde mining?
I have a really good business partner out of the Houston area that will come up here, and we are focused really on that education piece. Now, there is mining opportunities to be had. One of the things that we do is, alongside the education, is continually find those attractive larger projects. And we are working with a couple Bitcoin mining companies like you've spoken to, who are looking for the access to those projects. And then on top of that, really, I really love the teaching part. Who would have guessed? My entire life, I thought I just wanted to be that creative, think tank kind of engineer. And after kind of running some opportunities out, doing it myself, I realized specifically in this industry how much that education is lacking. And I have a huge love for teaching. And so I am really focused on how I can maintain the path so that I can continue to teach in this regard. And I know oil and gas is always going to be there. And I think Bitcoin is also going to continue to always be there. And I think bridging that gap towards a more seamless transition between our oil side is going to, again, the adoption rate is going to grow so fast that the innovation is going to come too. And so there's going to be really cool things that I can't even speak to yet because we don't have it here yet, because those great minds haven't shown up yet. And so I think that comes with that education.
Okay, sure.
So we do training here in Midland. We do like a 3-day training course where most of the students are coming in from out of town. We put them up in a hotel. And that's a big part of like, piece of that I think is needed. And so we train you guys, the students, on how to mine Bitcoin. We do classroom training mixed with field training. So we take you to the site and we show you all the processes, everything you could imagine, how we take custody of that gas at the wellhead, how we transition that gas and move it to a flow meter, how we pay the operator each month through the gas purchasing agreement that we made, why we signed a master service agreement, why I have insurance, why we use landmen, why a reservoir engineer is important.
Yeah.
Like everything that you probably would want to talk about, but you wouldn't think to ask. And again, this is just part of this education piece that, again, I'm not really teaching the operators anything they don't already know. I'm just bringing to light that this is kind of where the technology is moving towards, and like get on board.
Yeah. Come on, get on board with us, man.
That's it.
So I do, but the teaching, so any kind of new industry, the teaching is going to be like the big part. And I remember even smashing gas in for Parsley. They called us fairies because it was not that gas lift was a new technology, but it was kind of newer. Or it was getting to be more mainstream here in the Permian. But one of the issues was like it was definitely like profitable and made good money, but you had like the workforce had to be skilled enough though to run the system.
Yeah.
And that was like the hard thing to find throughout it. I don't know if it still is or not.
It still is. I believe it.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
It still is because when I did it, it does require some sort of skill. Like you can't just know.
Turn it on and it starts working.
Yeah, you gotta have a certain.
There's a process to do gas lift for sure in the field, and not all gas is the same. Not all wells are the same. Pressures change and fluctuate. Mm-hmm. I mean, these are problems that.
And so you're trying to now you have a brand new industry in Bitcoin, and isn't that like the first part? Now you have to start the training cycle to actually get people to. I bet it's the same kind of way we're gonna have to get to. Where people understand skilled labor.
The skilled labor needs to be there, but at the same time, with the skilled labor, there's an education piece that the C-suite guys need to have. Okay. Like the CEOs, CFOs of the world, they also need to see that this is what the operation looks like, and if here's what the arbitrage is available to us if we pursue this route. It doesn't just have to be about the Bitcoin mining piece. It can be more about what do our shareholders want? What does our stock rely on? Well, it relies on good quarters where you're economically viable and you're making money. And if you're not doing that because you're a bad operator, I don't know what to tell you. You probably won't be around long. It's going to typically be the ones who adopt new technology are the ones who are going to outlast all the other competition. And I mean, call it whatever you want, but I think it's just, again, it's just an indication that a group has not just put up the white flag, that they're still willing to learn. And the CEO's understanding that the viability of Bitcoin, where it's going to be here for a very long time, is going to, I think it's going to help pave a way for the operating adoption to happen, right? Because a little secret to you guys out there, Bitcoin's like $96,000, but when you mine Bitcoin right now, we're mining a whole Bitcoin for $60,000, and I'm a small guy, I'm a small enterprise. There are operations that are doing well better than I am, and but I'm just saying that do you want to pay $100,000 for your Bitcoin, or do you want to pay $60,000 for your Bitcoin and sell it for $100,000? And again, this is just something that the executives kind of need to know exist. The guys down on the ground that are doing all the hard work, making it happen, they just need to be more aware that the gas needs to be consistent and it needs to be going to here consistent. We need to be running it here at this temp, this rate, this pressure, and then through this work, we're going to realize more opportunities in the field that the CEOs are going to say, hey, let's talk to these guys, see if they can actually do this with us like I was talking about, and let's not build the pipeline this time. Let's save $10 million in some acreage dedications and relieve ourselves, bring a Bitcoin miner out, let him scale with you, and then after 3 years, if things don't work out, or maybe they do work out, you can always have a backup. Imagine the pipeline being the backup to you. Let the Bitcoin guys come first and do your first takeaway, and then when the gas is depleted, go tie into the gas lines and sell into the open market, right? Or the midstream kind of give you a better deal. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love it as a bolt-on, I know this is gonna sound. I'm going to go off track a little bit, but I remember whenever I was doing compression, there was a lot of, you would have all the little liquid natural gas, your NGLs drop out. And I see us starting to capture that. And we weren't capturing that before, but now it's a market, and now it's capturing it. And so it's just I feel like, and I could be wrong, I'm not one of the smart oil and gas guys here, but it would serve the Permian Basin better to have, wind, solar, all that, like in Bitcoin. And I know that I feel like the culture of the Permian Basin, we care about Bitcoin too as as keeping the dollar. I mean, I think that's what one of the purposes is. It keeps the dollar in check to not let us go inflate the dollar.
Sure.
Yeah, right. It keeps you a good track on that. And I think that's what we all like to see too. Like, we not letting the government get out of hand with a dollar
Or with the spending.
or the spending. Yeah, not letting them get out of hand. And like, how can we track that? And like, Bitcoin's right there to like give it a check. It seems like
Sure.
right. It's checking it, right?
I mean, that's the
Like,
best ledger that we have. It's pretty safe. Everything has a place. I think a big piece of the Bitcoin that people maybe don't see is the ability for the contract itself, right? A safe contract, a smart contract. And I think a good adoption example would be one day, I believe, you could sell your oil and gas minerals, your property for Bitcoin. That you should be able to sell a hard asset for another hard asset. And in some parts of the world, Bitcoin is perceived as like a real property, just like your ranch, just like your minerals, and as a tax haven, as a maybe future 1031 exchange. Oil companies could sell their positions into Bitcoin instead of US dollars. And instead of sitting that US dollars into a 1031 exchange, Bitcoin is that 1031 exchange. And if Bitcoin appreciates in that time, then the operator sold for 100 million and then buys a new asset for 150 million. And Bitcoin could go buy another asset. So I think that that's where the oil and gas community see to gain some of the biggest value in the use case of Bitcoin. And again, that's educating like the top execs to do the adoption. And then they're like, all right, if we're going to adopt this, how do we adopt it? Well, then we mine it with the resources that you already are generating this gas. And it doesn't have to be all your gas. Give us 10% of your entire gas. And let's turn 10% of your books into Bitcoin, and the 90% you can sell back to the market. You know what I mean? Like, that's an education piece. And then they adopt the technology, and then the technology flourishes. And then above, the big dogs, they see the Bitcoin price flourish, and the underlying value of their oil company goes up. Boom. So that's my future.
That's your, that's it. Yeah. Okay. So what do you, what would be, is that the part you would tell everyone at the end here? Like,
I mean, I think that's just a benefit of doing business in this space. That I think that one day that will be available. And while I talk about that like it's something new and unheard of, I think tomorrow that will be a normal construct of how you do business day to day. You want to sell your minerals for Canadian or for the yen or for some coin or for Bitcoin. And that, do you want to sell your car for Bitcoin? Do you want to sell your house for Bitcoin? I think all of these constructs will be a norm.
A norm, yeah.
And I think that the education piece is like, hey, Bitcoin's not going anywhere, so maybe have a little laying around maybe for a rainy day. And then that rainy day, this is what it looks like. You could spend it like this, or this. You could capture this yield. You could capture this interest rate, And that's just the education piece. And if I can facilitate in any way of that education adoption, like, point me in the right direction.
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. That's it.
Yeah. So I think that Bitcoin will continue to be adopted, and then as it was the only one that I've seen, right, since I've been, that hasn't been that. Well, it was like a nerd thing, but now it's been highly mainstream, and because we see like all these like coins come out that people make, and then there's big fraud around it, and people lose a lot of money with these like. I saw the famous people losing a lot of money, like creating fake coins.
Yep.
And Bitcoin's been the only one that's has fluctuated, but
I mean, there's something to be said about crypto as one construct and then Bitcoin. Everything that I typically see in the crypto world, someone is going to say well, what is this compared to Bitcoin?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Okay,
that's
so
tough.
like,
yeah,
so
yeah, that's another education piece. Now I think you're gonna have to say, hey, look, dude, Bitcoin's been here.
Yeah.
Like all this stuff.
and
is,
if they have to relate themselves to Bitcoin, then maybe you should just be holding Bitcoin. So I'm not gonna.
Yeah,
and I'm
right.
not. This is not financial advice,
Right.
and I'm not your guru in this world for that. But I will say that like it goes to show that there are flags when all these pairings on these exchanges are, well, what does it perform against Bitcoin? How is this performing against Bitcoin? And if that's the case, then I don't really care about its performance. Clearly, I just need to be focused on this Bitcoin facet,
Sure.
and kind of put my efforts there, and that's honestly how I approach that as well.
Okay. Well, with that, Paul, I'm ready. We're gonna wrap it up, and I'm excited for the future of Bitcoin, and I'm gonna continue. We'll continue talking about this, and I want to figure out that path
for the rental business.
For the rental business,
Yeah.
like that's exciting to me, you know, because I am in a business that is not new, and so for me it would be cool. Like, hey, I can push, you know, I can push the
boundaries of how you serve your clients
and have you serve, you know, in the equipment rental industry. Like that'd
100%.
be cool to say, hey, I pushed here. No, I didn't just do the status quo. So
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
If I'm able to be part of that, Bill, dude,
Yeah.
I'd love it. And
Yeah.
thank you for this opportunity to come on
Thanks
and
for
talk to
having
you.
me, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Take care.